We have a wonderful guest, Josh Hammer, and right before I get to him on this breaking news, I just want to explain what took place. There was testimony under oath by Comey on September 30, 2020. Statute of limitations runs out in just a few days. It's a 5-year statute of limitations. And Comey testified that he did not leak and he didn't authorize any leaks. The problem with that testimony is McCabe, who reported to Comey, he maintained that he did leak and that he informed Comey of his decision. And Comey denied authorizing a leak, and McCabe said yes, he informed him, and it was authorized. So you have conflicting statements under oath from McCabe and Comey. Now, this is no minor matter, to be quite honest about it. I know the media will downplay it, but this whole Russia collusion thing blew up big time, dragged the nation into it. It was a complete fraud from day one, beginning to end. We know that as a matter of fact. And it was as a result of Ted Cruz's questioning. And he highlighted the contradictory statements. And he pointed out, one of you is lying. To either Comey or McCabe. Honestly, you don't screw around with Ted Cruz too much when it comes to this kind of examination. So, and even the Inspector General's report in 2018, they said McCabe had showed a lack of candor, misleading investigators, the involvement of his leak in their investigation. And, of course, McCabe's defense disputed that. Comey's reaction to the IG report, he acknowledged its findings. Lack of candor, a key difference. The IG report accused McCabe of a lack of candor. So you're going to see this, if it plays out, and you've got more than those two. You've got the whole CIA and intelligence side. Now, some people will call this retribution. I don't call it retribution. This issue's been hanging out there for a long time, and of course Biden was sweeping it under the rug. He didn't want anything to do about it. Josh Hammer, not to be unfair to you, what's your initial thinking about all this?
Mark, great to join you as always. I predicted this would happen. This is actually my public prediction. I thought this would be the ultimate result of the Pam Bondi task force that they announced with the new Russiagate documents, because the time frame that you laid out, Mark, is pretty undeniable. I mean, it fits squarely within the 5-year statute of limitations. It seems to me to be pretty clearly a perjury. I guess the question is, will it stick? I mean, that's kind of $1 million question here, right? It's easy enough to indict him. Can you actually get a unanimous pool of jurors to convict in what will inevitably be a very high?
We're losing our friend Josh on the cell phone. Let's see if we can't circle back there, Mr. Producer. All right, he's going to try and get him back. Josh is a very important voice. I want to get him back. I also have a number of other questions, too. And his point is well taken. Look, we might think it's a slam dunk. In fact, it is a slam dunk. It is. I've seen a lot of cases in my lifetime. This is a slam dunk. His point is, you got to hope a jury finds that. And I think a jury can find that. And I think this is a much bigger issue than the media think it is, as they try and just wrap this around Trump's neck, as they try to wrap everything around Trump's neck. But this was a glaring issue when it happened. And it's a glaring issue now. Go ahead, Josh. Sorry, we lost you.
No problem. Yeah, look, Mark, I think the indictment is pretty straightforward. The actual unanimous juror is going to be potentially an uphill battle if this is in D.C., which is where I believe it's going to play out.
No, it's in Northern Virginia, I think.
Okay, got it. So, and that's potentially a fair bang for your buck proposition there. Look, I mean, it's very, very hard to see what Jim Comey's defense is here on the actual substantive merits. I mean, I went back and reviewed the transcripts after the Pam Bondi task force was a couple months ago. It's pretty cut and dried perjury. And, Jim Comey is a guy who has been on record as just totally mocking what happened to Michael Flynn there back during the transition period. I mean, Comey is the one responsible for throwing Michael Flynn under the bus. I mean, in many ways, Mark, I actually have long been arguing that the seeds of discord that today afflict the American citizenry, where Americans have virtually no trust in elites and institutions with narratives more generally, I draw a direct line all the way back to Russiagate. I think it starts with Russiagate and then continues with the Mueller probe that swallows up half the Trump presidency. You get the 2020 election, Hunter by a laptop, and the FBI that collusion, the COVID-19 lockdown.
All right, here's what we're going to do. Rich, try again, and maybe Josh can move to another location or something like that. But he's making great points, and I don't want to lose him. And just to reiterate, his point there is that he believes, and I think it makes sense, that a lot of the souring on American institutions started right here with this whole Russiagate nonsense, this whole Russia hoax. And you watch how the media tries to cover this up, and tries to do a U-turn and attack Trump. ABC's already done this. That if it wasn't for Trump and his text, none of this would happen. Well, maybe true, maybe false, but it should happen. This has been one of these glaring issues that has just hung out there because the Biden regime didn't want to pursue it, as you can imagine, and they didn't. And it's not the only one. Do we have them or not? Okay, we're going to call him back on a different line after the break and bring Josh back. I want to discuss this. I also want to discuss his last discussion and maybe prior discussions with Charlie Kirk. He spoke to Charlie at some length the day before Charlie was assassinated. Josh Hammer has written a great book. He's an Orthodox Jew, and Charlie sought him out for how to address some of the issues that might come up in Utah related to Israel and Judaism and anti-Semitism and so forth. So I have some questions. We'll be right back. Folks, I have a question for you. Do you believe America's best days are still ahead? With the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence coming up in less than a year, my friends at the Heritage Foundation are taking stock of the current situation, and they need your input. They've launched a survey on America's future to gauge how Americans feel right now about where we are as a nation and where we're headed in the next 250 years. You know, for decades, your American values have been under attack, but now, with President Trump's administration in office, we have an opportunity to turn the tide and usher in a new golden age for America. But the Heritage Foundation needs to hear from you. What policies do patriots like you most care about? What do you believe are the defining principles of America? What legacy do you believe we should pass on to the next generation? Please visit heritage.org/Levin today and share your feedback and help shape the future of America. That's heritage.org/LEVIN. Paid for by the Heritage Foundation. We're here with our friend Josh Hammer. Wrote this great best-selling book, Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation, and really of the West, as he points out. I just want to pursue this a little further, and I want to get to another issue with you, Josh, which is this. The more I think about this guy, Comey, and the point you make, which is a very good point, that he did grave damage, he and the others, to the public's view of our institutions. He really did. I mean, and he knew as this was proceeding, this whole Russia hoax stuff, that it was a lie. He dragged the nation through this. They set up a special counsel to investigate this. God knows if they would have issued more indictments or indictments period on this. I mean, he sat back and he watched his dirty work in many respects, no?
Yeah, that is all emphatically true. I mean, we now know beyond the shadow of a doubt. I mean, we've really known this for years, Mark. You know, our buddy Lee Smith has literally wrote multiple books on this. So we've known a lot of these scummy, and that really is the word. We've known a lot of these scummy details about Russiagate for years. But even more details came to light in July with the DNI and CIA declassifications. And there simply is no doubt at this point that when they decided to launch this investigation, that they were laundering, among other things, highly politicized Hillary Clinton laundered quote-unquote intelligence, namely the infamous Steele dossier. Comey knew all of this. He was well aware of all of this. He was the reason that Michael Flynn got dismissed essentially before his job even started. And yeah, I think the relevant point in the year 2025, because a lot of folks be like, oh, Josh, oh, Mark, Russiagate was a long time ago. And fair enough, it actually was. But the reason I think it's so relevant is this point that I was making before the break, which is that we have Russiagate to thank for the beginning of a series of events that have caused the American people to lose catastrophic, cataclysmic levels of trust. And you look at the inability today to distinguish, in many cases, truth from lies, facts from fiction. I think a lot of this inability to intake information, decide that which is right and that which is wrong, comes from these series of psyops. And I think the original psyop of the past decade really was Russiagate, and Jim Comey was at ground zero of that all along with John Brennan.
President has posted justice in America, one of the worst human beings this country has ever been exposed to, is James Comey, the former corrupt head of the FBI. Today he was indicted by a grand jury, 2 felony counts for various illegal and unlawful acts. He has been so bad for our country for so long and is now at the beginning of being held responsible for his crimes against our nation. I want to move on to another topic, and that is your relationship, your friendship with Charlie Kirk. Your last conversation with him, there's a lot of very bad people out there, Josh. I've talked about them on the air. I've named them. I'm not going to drag you into this, okay? But who are taking his horrendous murder and appear to be projecting their own ideological pursuits or even unhinged beliefs on top of him. And what I've tried to do here is actually play my discussions with Charlie Kirk, whether it was on Fox, whether it's on radio, so people could hear what he said. Same with these clips that I've been playing. I'm not cherry picking or anything. I'm just playing them. This is what he said about this and so forth. Now, his opinions change from time to time. Sometimes he might have 2 positions on the same issue. I mean, he was working things through like the rest of us and so forth. Tell us about the conversation. What was he trying to do? And it must have been a double shock to you. You just spoke to him. And the next thing you know, he's been assassinated.
Yeah, Mark, it's a day that I will not forget anytime soon. Look, I've known Charlie for years, as many of us in this space have, but we became considerably closer, I'd say, over the past year and a half, give or take. We were talking virtually every day for a while, and we were talking about all the issues that you would expect, about how to fight rising anti-Semitism, how to contain it, what to do about it, how to make sure that younger millennial and Gen Z conservatives in particular stay focused and care about the Israel issue. So, yes, literally the night before, from 6 to 7 p.m. on the East Coast, Charlie held a Zoom call with myself, a rabbi, mutual friend of ours over in Jerusalem, and a couple others. And he had a series of questions. He basically said, when they asked me on this campus tour about genocide, how do I respond? When they asked me about apartheid, how do I respond? And Charlie knew these answers, Mark. He was very knowledgeable in general, but especially probably on the Israel issue. So it's not that he necessarily needed the facts. I think he wanted to workshop some messaging. What is the most effective way of messaging, communicating to the younger generation? But the mere fact, Mark, that he had me on the night before his campus tour to go over this issue, I mean, that singularly disproves this notion that you're hearing from the Candace Owenses, the Tucker Carlsons of the world, that Charlie Kirk was ready to pull a 180 and renounce his friendship with the Jewish people. Mark, this is a guy who literally has a forthcoming book, hopefully it's published posthumously, about keeping the Sabbath, and he kept his version of the Sabbath when Orthodox Jews do, from Friday night to Saturday night. He used to study Torah with Dennis Prager. Charlie Kirk, Mark, his Christianity was something of a throwback to the Christianity of the American founding. It was the Christianity of George Washington, John Adams, John Jay, Alexander Hamilton. It was rooted in the Hebrew Bible. So these issues, the Jewish people, the state of Israel, these were not just normal public policy issues for Charlie Kirk. They were core to his worldview. And, we didn't agree on necessarily everything. We would quibble about where to draw the line when it comes to platforming. I didn't love the fact that Tucker Carlson spoke at the same Turning Point conference in July that I spoke at when I debated Dave Smith. So we definitely did not agree 100% of the time. But his heart was unequivocally in the right place when it came to these matters, because his way of thinking about the world through his Christian worldview was in a fundamentally sound place as well. And yes, it was absolutely positively shocking when I first got the message that he had been shot. I did a double take. I couldn't believe it. And we've lost a truly special human being. We've lost an amazing father, an amazing husband, a great friend of mine, and an amazing friend of the Jewish people, no matter what the Candaces and Tuckers of the world might say.
In fact, I just returned from Israel. He's extraordinarily popular there. They're very upset about it. They have incredibly large murals of him. We saw that in Tel Aviv when we went to the Netanyahu trial. We saw posters of him in Jerusalem. Let me ask you this, Josh Hammer. I haven't heard the head of Qatar, the head of Egypt, the head of Saudi Arabia say a damn thing. And I did hear on multiple occasions the Prime Minister of Israel praise him. What do you make of that?
So Prime Minister Netanyahu, the day after the assassination, Mark, he went on Fox News. He went on Harris Faulkner's Fox News show. And he made reference to this letter that Charlie wrote to him back in May. And I actually was given access to this letter from Charlie's team back in June or July or so. And I didn't talk about it publicly because it was a very kind of private hush-hush thing. And then Netanyahu spoke about it publicly, so it's no longer much of a secret. Well, let me tell you, Mark, I've read every letter of this letter. It's critical of how Israel conducts PR, and Charlie had a lot of, I think, very sound, constructive advice for how Israel can fix some of its PR issues. But the very first line of this letter that he wrote to BB back in May, literally the first line, is, as a Christian, one of my greatest joys in life is befriending Jewish people and the state of Israel. That's how the letter begins. Because, again, he was, whatever disagreements or objections he might have had, he genuinely was a friend. And he was not a friend necessarily to the radical Muslim world. In fact, if you look at his public statements over the final year of his tragically truncated life, he was really, really critical of not just radical Islam, but actually Islam in general. He would repeatedly argue that Islam and the Judeo-Christian biblical West are incompatible, which is one of the core themes, by the way, as you know, of my book, Israel and Civilization. In fact, Mark, you'll appreciate this. On that final Zoom call that Charlie and I had the night before he was tragically killed, he actually joked to me. He said, Josh, man, I'm going to help you sell so many book copies on this tour, because when the students ask me about this topic, I'm just going to say, buy Josh Hammer's book. That's the same book that has your quote, my friend, on the top of the cover, actually, the Mark Levin quote right there. So, look, again, the Candaces, the Tuckers, they're trying to rewrite him as some sort of martyr for their demonic and satanic causes, and that is what they are. I mean, they're demonic, satanic causes, this whole outrageous information operation to try to drive a wedge between the original people of the book, the Jewish people, and the great Gentile offshoot, the Christians who have built Western civilization. It's evil. It has to be stopped. Charlie was a force for good in trying to prevent that rupture, and I just hope that we can try to keep those two people, the Jews and the Christians, together in his absence.
You make such great points. You know, he texts a lot with everybody, including me and my wife. And I remember where we disagreed. He wasn't sure originally about taking out these Iranian nuclear sites. Not with Israel. He said, that's fine, but I don't know that we should get involved. And he was pulled by two different camps, and he wasn't sure where to come down. And he and I disagreed on that. I said, you need to be sure. This is the president's position. We need to support the president. So when it was done and very successful, he sends us a text. And he says, I think we should unite behind the president right now. And I said, I think you're right, which has been my position. I am uniting behind the president. I think it's a good thing. He was always honorable. And when he debated issues, he was always honest. And I think that's very, very important. In other words, even when he felt he was wrong and knew he was wrong, he always kind of said so. And he was very, very tied into President Trump. He was very, very tied into the state of Israel, too. And this is why I'm so troubled. I just find the people, look, you talk to him. I've talked to him many times. My wife talked to him many times. I've got texts that I'm not going to read, how he actually thought about some of these people who claim to be his buddies. by the way. I'm not going to do that. But this effort now to say, Charlie, I'm doing this because Charlie would do it. I'm doing this because Charlie would do it. And I know that's not true. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Mark, it's just disgusting that we're even having this conversation, isn't it?
True.
I mean, this young 31-year-old husband and father is assassinated by a left-wing, transgender-adjacent, furry, fetishist, left-wing activist, and somehow we're having to defend Charlie Kirk's friendship with the Jews. I mean, like, you know, draw that line for me. I mean, how do we get from point A to point B? So it's just totally nuts, frankly, that we're even having this conversation. It speaks to the nefarious and, in many ways, the evil ends and pet crusades of some of these various actors. But you make a very astute point about Charlie, which is if you watch these videos of him on the campuses over the years, he would always be so calm. And he was genuinely, you know, he was tragically killed, Mark, under a tent that said, "Prove me wrong."
Yeah.
And he was actually interested in not necessarily just bringing up the Turning Point USA campus activists. He wanted to talk to the lefties. He wanted to actually engage in political debate. Again, he was very much a throwback. His Christianity was a throwback. His viewpoints on free speech, on free debate was very much a throwback. It was something of a throwback to a bygone era. And he was so calm and so still because his goal in these exchanges was not to get one of these viral kind of own the libs style YouTube moments. Rather, his goal, I think, was to actually on a one-on-one basis try to draw people over to the cause of conservatism, the cause of truth and justice, the American way, and so forth there. And you know, again, it's a tremendous void. I mean, look, Charlie and I, we had our disagreements as any friend did, but you know, he went above and beyond for me in a kind of a personal, professional way, at least, 2-3 times, whatever it was there. He was a loyal person who would never hesitate to pick up the phone, make a phone call when a friend needed a favor. And above all, Mark, he was kind of indispensable trying to hold the MAGA coalition together. He fervently believed in this MAGA coalition, and he saw himself, I think, properly as one of the younger leaders of that coalition. The other thing that I worry about is in his absence, what will happen to some of the truly, truly fringe stuff, kind of the Nick Fuentes neo-Nazi filth that Charlie was really doing a lot to keep at bay. He really did draw a hard line at some of that. Now, we can kind of quibble whether he drew a hard enough line at some individuals, like a Tucker, for instance, but he really did do yeoman's work in drawing a lot of these hard lines, and I kind of am worried about what might happen there in his absence as well.
No, it's great points. Josh Hammer has this great book, folks, Israel and Civilization. And in it, he's talking about Christianity as well, the West. Where do these ideas come from? Will we survive? How do we survive? What do we need to do? It's a tremendous book. I'd encourage you to get it at Amazon.com. Josh Hammer, thank you, my friend, and God bless you, and you be safe, too.
You too, Mark.
All right, be well.